Welcome on to the next edition of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. I am so excited for this episode. We have got a very cool guest on with a phenomenal story and is killing it when it comes to his running, but I'll do the introduction in just a moment. My name is Brad Nadalt. We've got the coach Lindsey Parry with us once again today. Lindsey, nice to touch base and some great feedback from our chat with Grant Jenkins last week. If you haven't listened to that, definitely go back and listen, but things all good in Joburg at the moment where you are?
Yeah, very good, thank you. And finally getting some of my own medicine, so to speak, getting consistent, doing the things. Getting dark out, but just really enjoying being back at it.
Yeah, and I don't know if we've mentioned it on this podcast, but I know we have on one of the other podcasts we host. Tell people what you're training for. I've got a mind like a goldfish. I don't know if we have mentioned it on here.
I am training for the Berlin Marathon, but obviously that is a little ways off, which has been why I kind of struggled early in the year with motivation. And I really, and my first one is actually imminent, my first cross-country race. So I've gone back to my first love,
Back to your
which was
roots.
always cross-country. I used to love, in South Africa, we call it landloop, walking across the earth, I guess is the best direct translation. But we don't walk, obviously. So that's coming up, my first one. Tutu's been preparing me for that. So yeah, it's all going well. But the big prize is Berlin, and can I get myself back under 3 hours as a 48-year-old? That's the target.
I was going to ask, I didn't want to put you under undue pressure. I was going to say, are you just going to tick off another major or are you going to be racing it? But I think you just answered that question. So that is good news. I'm glad to hear that. Cool. Let's get into today's guest. And I'm so amped to have him on. We head to the North Island of New Zealand right now to welcome Justin Hill onto the podcast. Justin is an ex-South African, been living in New Zealand for a long time, but is doing phenomenal things from a running perspective. And we'll talk some of the performance things that he's been up to, but I wanted to delve a little bit into his running history, how he got into the sport, and also some of the things that have worked and haven't worked for him over the years. Justin, welcome onto the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. It's great to have you with us.
Hello, Brad and Lindsey. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
No, I'm super excited, Justin, because obviously you've been training with us for a while, but I heard a podcast interview that you did on a New Zealand podcast called Run Adjacent a few weeks ago, and I was like, you know what, we have to get Justin on because he's one of ours and he's doing great things, and we're going to talk about some of those in just a moment. But you weren't necessarily a runner your entire life. You were telling me offline just before we started recording that in junior school you did a little bit of running, but you try to avoid any performance gains. If top 5 got you into an athletic meet, you made sure you finished 6th.
Yeah, I am a bit regretful of that. I guess I had anxiety and nobody ever picked up on it. I can vividly remember in races at school coming right up front in the front. I ran easily and I did well. But then I heard the teachers talking, saying, okay, now it's time that we got to start collecting the first 5 because they're going through to the big event. And that made me panic. So I just made sure that I didn't get in the top 5.
In hindsight, you probably are kicking yourself, but you are seeing some really good sort of performances now in your early 60s. You're 61 years old now, and we'll talk about some of those in a moment. But taking a step back, you stopped running for a long time. You weren't a runner for most of your adult life, and I believe you picked up a fair amount of weight. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I was in good shape when I went into the army in South Africa. Made sure I was fit because I'd heard that would be best going into the army. But then after that, no exercise, loved food. And yeah, I picked up a lot of weight. And I got to a point where I realized I needed to do something about it, went on a diet, lost 30 kilograms. But as soon as I stopped the diet, I just picked up all the weight again. Because it wasn't balanced with exercise and it was just doing a specific diet. And so I realized that it needed to be a lifestyle change. So that's when the exercise started needing to happen. And I remembered that I was good at running at school. So running was my go-to.
Yeah, Justin, I can relate and hard relate to that sort of losing weight, picking it up, because I mean, Lindsey's known me since I was a youngster. I mean, we went to junior school together, and I've always had weight issues, and it's one of those things, as you said, that if it's not paired with a healthy lifestyle, there's lots of ways to lose weight, and some of them more healthy than others. And I always joke, and I probably shouldn't joke, but you could lose a fair whack of weight by amputating a leg, but that's not going to be great for your long-term health and longevity. But what was it that made the difference, the real difference on keeping the weight off? Because I mean, I can see it now. You're fairly healthy, and you're not overweight. But what was the thing that really sort of enabled you to keep that weight off that you have?
Well, I think I've realized that in order to achieve a goal, your reason needs to be very strong. And so I had to think about, why am I going to do this? Because when that piece of cake tempts you, or when you feel like eating something that's not so good for you, if your reason is not strong enough and your why is not strong enough, then you're overpowered by the temptation and you lose the battle. And so, thinking about being there for my kids and my grandkids, one of my goals, my wife asked me, what would I like when we first met? What's one of the things that I really want as a goal in life? And I said, to become a grandfather. And I realized that, in the unhealthy lifestyle I had, that maybe that wasn't going to happen if I didn't start doing something about it. And so when you've got a good, strong goal, then you can achieve whatever you set your mind to.
Yeah. Linz, you wanted to jump in there quick?
Yeah, I mean, look, I love the story because kind of as a business, that's also the journey that we're on. It's like we're using performance, but essentially trying to drive this be healthier, be fitter, be stronger. So what points in this journey did you go from kind of knowing you needed to be healthier and wanting to feel better to kind of going, okay, I am good at this, I'm enjoying being good at this, and I want to be even better at this? So when did the mindset then become quite goal orientated specifically to your running?
I was diagnosed with arthritis. I was really struggling. All the things you're saying about the good feelings of running weren't there. I was in pain. Every time I ran, I would feel the jarring through my joints. My arthritis would swell up and I'd have to stop running. So it was really painful. And hence the weight loss also being part of it, and getting onto that journey. But I think where it really turned around for me was joining a park run, and just the community was just awesome. Having everybody else around you encouraging you, and realizing that you're there not to try to beat somebody else, but just to improve on where you are at.
Yeah. If I can just jump in there, and this is particularly for our US audience, we've got a fairly large listener base in the US. We talk about parkruns often, and I think parkrun has really, over the years since it started, changed the face of running. And not just in this age group, not 50, 60, 70 plus, but across the board. And parkruns are a free weekly timed running event. It's 5 kilometers or just over 3 miles that happens around the world. If you go to parkrun, I think their website's parkrun.com or parkrun.org, you'll see them. They are popping up in the States as well, and they're phenomenal. Justin, I'm with you. I think parkrun is such a great place to start. If somebody's listening to this and they've stumbled across this podcast and they don't run, parkrun is just such a, there's no pressure. It's a welcoming environment. It's just amazing. Like, I really, really, really love, I can't speak highly enough about what parkrun has done for people's general health and fitness. And you don't have to go further than 5Ks. I mean, South Africans, and you can probably speak to this too because you've lived here, so you know, South Africans are a different breed. I mean, people start running in South Africa, and I'm one of those people. They start running because they want to run an ultra marathon. Whereas people around the world start running because they want to do a 5K, and that's where they stop. They do 5Ks every week and they're happy. Where South Africans, if you haven't run a marathon, like, what's wrong with you? Which is not probably a healthy way to approach your running. So I'm really glad that was that. But you had your fair share of injuries. It hasn't all been sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. You've picked up some injuries along the way, and you've managed to fix them. Tell us a little bit about sort of the injuries that you've had and how you've overcome what you've overcome.
Well, that wonderful supportive community at Parkrun that I spoke about was where that started changing for me. A mate, he's become a real good mate and has helped me and encouraged me, asked me one day if I'd read a book if he gave it to me. He had identified that I was overstriding, heel striking, sending the full force of every step through my arthritic joints, and I was hurting myself. So I read the book, and it started getting me thinking about changing my form. And I went through a process. It was really tough in the beginning, changing anything that you do with running. You just got to take it really slow and pick one thing and work on it slowly. But I'd managed to, over months, change my form. And all of a sudden I found I could run more consistently without having to stop because of pain. And because of that, being more consistent, my fitness started picking up. I started feeling better when I ran, and it became so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, it's interesting. Lindsey, I'm going to ask you a question here because I mean, I've known you for a long time too, and we often get the question about, do I need to change my form? Is it worthwhile changing my form? And I find it really interesting because it's definitely worked for Justin. So I know that you've worked with some elite athletes trying to change form, and you almost, not that you give up, but where you go, you know what, under pressure in race environments, it's like all bets are off and you just revert back to what you sort of like biomechanically were given. Your take on the way Justin's sort of fixed his form and how that's cleared up his injuries?
So I think the key thing for Justin there was that he recognized that A, it's very difficult to change form, and B, you can't change a lot of things at the same time. So one change at a time, and that it then has to be gradual and it's got to be in everything you do. And I think that's often a lot of the problem. And even when I did it, I mean, I did spend, sometimes an entire season of trying to fix form on triathletes in particular. And yes, I did experience this absolute, when the chips were down, just revert to type. But I think this is also in response to a unique issue. So if you carry on, and I think if Justin carried on the way that he was going, I think was the arthritis in your knees or your hips, Justin? But either way, he was on a one track to a new joint, or change the way you're doing it. So I think that was really the big difference here. And yeah, I think if something hurts one way and doesn't hurt the other way, that has to be a positive change. So I think the takeaway message here is, don't try and change too much. Don't try and change it quickly, and be patient.
Yeah. And if I can add in there too, Justin, you've sort of touched on one of the big cornerstones of what we talk about here at Coach Parry, and that's consistency. That you can't long-term become a better runner or run to your full ability if you aren't consistent. And you've got to do what it takes to build that consistency into your training. And you've obviously done that, and you are reaping the rewards now, which is amazing. But I did want to circle back just to the arthritis as well, Justin, that we do have a few members who sort of struggle with arthritis. And I know a lot of people in their 50s, 60s and beyond, it is a challenge of daily living, is dealing with arthritic joints. And if I think back to my childhood, my gran was riddled with arthritis. But I think I said this to Lindsey the other day, and this was in the early 80s. And I don't know, I mean, obviously I was a kid in the early 80s, so I didn't really know what was happening medically and in that sort of field. But I mean, my grandmother used to, I mean, she stayed active. She played golf twice a week, so she was moving. And I think what we talk about here is motion is lotion. Like, even if you are arthritic, you do need to keep moving, because as soon as you stop, it becomes worse. And she used to seek treatment. I mean, she used to see a physio once or twice a week, and acupuncturist, and it was amazing, because I don't think it was that mainstream in the 80s to do that sort of treatment. I mean, I might be speaking under correction, but I mean, still, people today struggle to go and see a physio, but my gran was like religious about it, which is amazing. But tell us about your experience with your arthritis and how you manage it, and the flare-ups and that sort of thing that you have to deal with.
Yeah, I think I've really got it under control very well. By the way, my grandmother was also my inspiration. She also suffered severely from arthritis. And yeah, so the way I manage it is, obviously now having changed my form, I've also, one of the things I love about the Coach Parry program is that there is the strength training. So strengthening all the muscles around those joints just helps prevent further injury to those joints. and keep moving. A lot of people use arthritis as an excuse not to exercise or not to be mobile. I believe that exercise is a reason to arthritis is a reason to exercise and keep those joints flexible and moving. So the great thing about the program is the strength training. I really feel that has made a big difference to the way I feel physically. And the other thing is recovery. I can remember when I first started out running, I wanted to be a runner. I didn't want to be a jogger. So I Googled, what's the difference between a run and a jog? And Mrs. Google told me that a run is anything under 6 minutes and anything over would be a jog. And I didn't want to be a jogger. So I made sure all my runs on Strava. And I was hurting myself. I was still a bit overweight. I was overdoing it. And I had to do it every day. And so, I think you got to be realistic. You got to make sure that you've got that recovery. Nutrition, of course, is also important. And just take it a bit easy and be gentle with yourself, because you build yourself up slowly and allow the physical adaptations to take place slowly as you go through it. Be patient, I think, is the key to it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin, one thing I do like about what the approach that you've taken as well is you're not afraid to ask for help and look for help and seek it. And obviously you found us in your journey as well, but you've tried other things before you've been working with us too. And I mentioned performance. I mean, from a parkrun perspective, that is one of the things that you sort of track is how your parkrun times are going. And you've been a pretty good runner. I know you were hovering around just over 20 minutes before you started working with us. And that was the goal, was to try and get under 60. But tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've tried. I mean, you mentioned jumping onto Google and making sure you ran every single run under 6 minutes a K, which sometimes is good, but definitely not every single run, particularly your long ones, because you are looking for trouble then. But what are some of the things that you have tried that have worked? I mean, because there are lots of ways to approach this running thing, and some approaches work for some people and others don't for the same, and that same approach might not work for someone else. So what are some of the things that you have tried before coming to us? This episode of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast is brought to you by Active Forever. You love to run, but recovery just doesn't happen as fast as it used to. That's where Recover Plus Muscle Repair comes in. Designed for runners over 50, it includes whey protein for muscle repair, creatine for strength, and L-glutamine to fight soreness so you bounce back quicker and run pain-free. Fuel your recovery the right way. Head over to Get Active Forever and use the coupon code FAST to get 10% off your first order. That's getactiveforever.com.
Well, I think I tried several times to do a sub-20 park run, and I'd always gone and looked for a generic plan online and printed that off and then gone out and tried to do it. And what the problem there was that possibly I was choosing the wrong plan for where I was, trying to take too big a step, because I think at that time I was around the 23 minutes, and trying to then jump straight to a sub-20 was trying to take too big a step too quickly. And so every time I went out on this 12-week training plan, I would be doing paces at what I was supposed to be achieving at the end of the plan. And so that's another reason why I love this Coach Parry plan, is that you're building up in blocks with rests in between or deload weeks, giving you a chance to progressively get better without injuring yourself. So you're starting off in day one with the intention of eventually getting to the end of the 12-week plan and hitting that goal, but you're not training at that intensity at the end. You're building that up slowly. And that then prevents injuries from occurring and enables you to be persistent and keep going through the training.
Absolutely. And you came fairly close. I mean, before you joined us, you came fairly close to sub-20.
Yes. The big difference was when I'd started the training, I think those interval sessions, when I started the Coach Parry plan, they were great. But it's such a nice balance between the recovery periods in between. I stuck exactly to the plan. I thought to myself, look, this plan's been well thought out. It's been tried and tested. Lots of people have done it. Why try to change anything? I'm going to fit my life around this plan for 12 weeks. And I just thought, I'm not even going to try to shift any or change days or anything like that. This plan and the rest periods, etc., have been thought out. I'm just going to stick to it for 12 weeks and give it a good go. And I remember coming up to the first time trial after the first 4 weeks, I was in a bit of a minor panic because my Garmin was showing, prior to this, was showing that I should be able to do a sub 20. And doing the plan in those first 4 weeks, all of a sudden, my race prediction started taking a dive. It went downhill. And I thought, but I thought, no, I'm going to just trust the process. And I'm so glad I did, because I came out with 1936, I think it was, or 35 on my first time trial. And that was just after 4 weeks. But I must admit, I really stuck to the plan. I didn't change a thing. If the pace said, yeah.
And also, this must come with an asterisk, because yes, we do see short-term improvements like that sometimes, but you were highly conditioned coming in. So you had a lot of consistency and a lot of background, which had seen a lot of improvement up to that point. And by dialing in on where you were and doing the interval work at the right intensity and doing the longer stuff at the right intensity, so your balance improved. But because you already had such a big body of work behind you, or as a base, let's call it that, for most people who understand what that means, that's why you were able to improve so much. Because I mean, honestly, 25, I don't think non-runners or beginner runners can quite comprehend the step change that 30 seconds is over 5 kilometers. I mean, 6 seconds per kilometer is basically, it's an enormous change and improvement. So yeah, I think really the point I'm trying to make is that kind of change is possible when you fix a fundamental flaw in the training, but you do need to have a huge body of work behind you before that to unlock that. I mean, your typical improvement would be 5 to 10 seconds would already be bordering on a really nice improvement, which is why sometimes running can feel a little bit frustrating, because 5 seconds doesn't feel like a lot over 5 kilometers. But when you've been training hard, it's a second a kilometer, it's good. So look, that's just a phenomenal change. And how long have you been on the plan, and what is your personal best sitting at now?
My 5K personal best is 1919. I've been on the plan since January, but I must say that I've been watching all your videos and following your plan basically on your podcast and your videos for several months before that. And starting to also take note of some of the strength training. So I've been doing a few of the stuff that Shona has had on her prior to that. I had done a half marathon training with a local coach, and he had some strength training in there because he is very focused on that kind of thing. And I just did it because I was part of that, and it opened my eyes. I can say genuinely that the strength training, I can compare it to riding a bicycle. If you ride a normal bike and you ride an e-bike, the power that comes with an e-bike and how much easier it is what strength training feels like to me. It's just like every time you put your foot down, there's a bit more power there, and you're stronger, so you can hold your form better. You feel so much better, and it just gives for a much better running experience.
Justin, I absolutely love that analogy, and if it's okay with you, I'm going to steal it, because I think that is just the best way to describe, particularly from a performance perspective, and what strength training gives you. Obviously, we talk about the benefits from an injury prevention, but just from a putting force out, what strength training does for you as a runner, that is absolutely incredible. Tell me, I'm going to ask this question because there's something else I want to ask you too, and I know you've got some questions for Lindsey. I want to ask you a little bit about your metronome, but we'll get into that in just a moment. tell me a little bit about sort of you worked with a coach in person in New Zealand. Obviously, everything we do is online. How have you found that? Like, how has that worked for you? I know a lot of people do want to see a coach, and the coach needs to tell them what to do. But how have you coped with not physically seeing a coach in person once a week to find out what you're doing and helping you execute?
Yeah, I must admit, when I first signed up, I was a little bit hesitant about that. But gosh, the coaches are so quick at coming back to you on the forum. And, with all the wonderful videos you've got as well, each bit of strength training, if you're unsure by reading the description, you click on a video. So it's just as good as having the coach right there. And sometimes even better, because if it's midnight, you can still go and watch a video with a coach, whereas they wouldn't appreciate a call if you were one-on-one training at that time.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said that, because time zone wise, I mean, we're in like opposite ends of the world practically. I mean, you're in New Zealand. Most of our staff are in South Africa. We do have staff in the US and the UK as well, but it just, yeah, I mean, it works. Like, often people are hesitant because it's not in person, but so they worry about the time zones, and that definitely does work as well. Tell me a little bit about your metronome and training with the metronome. When I heard you first talk about that, I was like, wow, that is incredible. Was that part of you trying to fix your form that you got onto that and it's just carried through?
Yes. In the book that I read, he suggested that if you are struggling with your cadence being exceptionally low, that a metronome could help, or listening to songs at a certain speed. I don't really listen to songs. In fact, I didn't ever own a set of headphones. So when people do see me running with headphones, I'm not listening to music. I'm listening to a metronome. I've videoed myself, or got somebody to video me running after I'd realized that people had seen something. I thought, in my mind, I was a super athlete. I was agile and flying through the air. It was. But when I looked at the video, all of a sudden I saw all these things that I had to fix, and it was a bit overwhelming. But I just chose the one thing, and because my overstriding and heel striking was a big one, I chose cadence, to up my cadence, shorter, quicker steps. And I couldn't do it on my own. I kept on reverting back to, as soon as you got a bit tired. And so what I did was I got the metronome, and I think I was on average, I looked at my cadence was around 150. So all I did was I found a metronome at 155. I only took 5 beats more, didn't try to get anything bigger. And I went out doing that, and it was really hard work. My body was like shouting, I don't want to do this. This is, And what I read in the book was, don't, if you start finding it too hard and you're not running at the correct, stop the run. Because you're wanting to retrain the neural pathways, the new system. So if you revert back, they're never going to learn. So, it was really hard work. My heart rate was much higher, but I just persisted with it. And all of a sudden, it just started clicking. And then once I felt comfortable at that, I increased it again slightly. And that's how I developed it.
So what are you currently running at from a cadence perspective? What would the goal be on your runs?
180. That's if I'm doing a faster run. I don't take it with when I'm just doing my recovery runs, but I am conscious, and I can now keep at about 170 or so on my recovery runs without too much trouble.
That's super interesting. Are you like, if you, yeah, Lindsey, I know you've got a question here, but like if you're doing a park run, let's say you're doing a time trial, or it's the sort of end of the 12-week when you're racing, do you use the metronome in those sessions as well?
Yes.
Okay. Super interesting. Lindsey, you wanted to ask?
No, I just want to say that's right in the recommended range. I mean, yes, you get your Bekeles and Gebrselassie that are sitting at 184 plus, but really that 170 easy, 180 fast is right in the recommended range. So I just wanted to change tack slightly, and you mentioned one of the things that held you back as a youngster was the anxiety and around the pressure. So, that's the sort of thing that you learn to cope with as you get older rather than it goes away. And so I was just interested to know, how do you cope with that now? Because you've obviously put some pressure on yourself to continuously get faster. You've gotten yourself all the way down to 1919, which I just think is really, really phenomenal. So yeah, just generally, how do you cope around now, like not having that performance anxiety that you used to have?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Lindsay. In fact, I was wondering if maybe it had come back a little bit with my planned race that I had. I was obviously doing the 10K plan for the 12 weeks, in which I did these parkrun PBs as my time trials. But on Sunday, I did struggle a bit. I did get a new PB, but I was slightly disappointed that I didn't get, because I felt my training had gone so well. I could have done a sub 40. So I was at 41.36. My heart rate was high. There were a lot of people around. And one of my questions that I'll ask you when I get a chance is around my nutrition there, that I felt very nauseous, and I'm not sure whether it had a little bit maybe to do with the anxiety. But I think I'm so much better than I ever was. I've learned over the years and through various challenges to deal with it, and I find that my mind has become one of my strongest. I realize in sport, I think I read some books as part of this process, and also read some studies. And one of them that stood out to me was the basketball teams that were chosen in America for a study. And they both had to, one had to physically go and shoot hoops, and the other one just had to visualize doing it. So visualization has become a big part of what I do to prepare. And I'd visualize actually running that park run in my head several times before I did it. And I'd be calm, not go out too fast, and think the whole thing through, and how was I going to deal with the pain that would come with running hard. And I think because when my first child was born, I remember how anxious we felt, but we went on a prenatal class. And the nurse, it was a nurse that put on the class, and she worked at the hospital where we were going to have our child. And they took us through the process. And this is the forms that you'll have to fill in. This is where your wife will be taken while you're doing that, etc. And so by visualizing, you're kind of working through that process. So it becomes something that you're used to. And so mind, I mean, the body is important when you're doing athletics, especially running. But I think the mind's even more important.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you not to leave us hanging. I know the outcome of that study, and I think Lindsay does too. But for everyone else listening who's never heard about the basketball study, what happened to the guys who visualized versus the ones that shot the hoops?
Yeah, the ones that only visualized and never shot a hoop improved by a significant percentage more than the ones that did. Sorry, I get sidetracked with my stories.
No, I love that study, because it does prove the point, and it's just amazing what the mind is an incredible thing that we have, like, and dealing with. You mentioned obviously the performance anxiety. Have you struggled with anxiety in other aspects of your life throughout your life? If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsay and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
No, not really. I don't think. Yeah, I mean, I get nervous talking in front of cameras like I am now. So yeah, I suppose it's always been there a little bit, but I mean, yeah, I think I've learned to just work with it.
So look, so the irony, quite simply, is that anything that doesn't make you, okay, we call it nerves, but what nerves is anxiety. So anything that doesn't make you slightly nervous is just not important to you. So
that's
we
exactly
do
what
need,
you told your kid on that podcast that I listened to, and I resonated so well with that, Lindsay.
yeah, and so that's it. I mean, you want some of that. And you know, of ironies here, I actually had a consult with my son's doctor, because I chatted to him about that conversation. I had a conversation with my son around, he's always so excited to train for and talk about and go and do, they just finished their athletic season. But then when we wake up in the morning before the race, I can see that his anxiety starts to get in the way of that, and he actually stops looking forward to the race. And so he did pretty well at the we call it prestige, so the inter-schools competition. He did pretty well there. He ran his fastest time for the season. So from a position point of view, he didn't do as well as he had visualized, but he ran his fastest time of the season. So I was like explaining to him that that's all we can do as runners is run faster. That's our measure of our improvements. And then I said to him, listen, you don't look like you look like you want to do well, but you don't look like you enjoy this. And it goes back to 2 years ago where we had a little bit of a fallout around the effort that I felt he put into a race, not the result, the effort, but because he was young, he couldn't separate the two. And so he feels this extra pressure to perform because he doesn't know how I'm going to respond to his result. Anyway, that's a lot of stuff to say that part of the problem with anxiety and nerves is that we need a certain amount of it to activate and be ready. But too much of it starts to consume the energy that we need to perform well in the race. And if our cortisol levels get too high, it impedes the way that we move. So we feel awkward in our movements. And so you've got this great mechanism of visualization, which still allows you to be nervous enough on go to have the energy to activate. And anyway, this all of this is leading me to a product that I'm busy looking at and researching to maybe use on for my son, and it's called Heart Math. And what it helps is very much what you are doing, which is it helps you to get into the space of visualizing to stay calm, and it uses breathing and heart rates through an app to kind of help you to focus and kind of zone in on what it is that you're trying to do, but also walking back the unnecessary fears of failure or disappointing someone else or not reaching your target. So it just helps you to separate the negative and bring in the positives of what you are trying to achieve. And I think as adults, it's a little bit easier to remind ourselves why we're doing things. So that's one of the things that I always find, because visualization also works for me very, very well. And I often use it in training while I'm actually physically running and training, is focusing on what I'm trying to achieve, picturing myself on race day in my speed workouts. I'm trying to throw myself forward to what I'm going to feel like in a 10K race at the 6-7K mark, in a marathon at the 35-kilometer mark. So I'm kind of always using visualization to throw myself forward, but then also always to remind myself why I do what I do. And the number one goal for me is why I do what I do is to stay fit, healthy, and strong. And for this kind of dealing with stress in my everyday life. So those are the two big drivers of what my exercise is about, because that just brings down and reminds me that my marathon time isn't going to define the success of the last 3 months of my life. So I just always want to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. But for maybe younger kids or adults that really suffer with that anxiety, I think something like a heart math or similar to just help us to visualize and to be nervous, but a calm nervous, so that we don't burn up that energy, so that we don't like struggle with like tension and an
Tension.
inability to let that training come out on race day.
Super interesting. Justin, you mentioned you didn't go sub 40, but you did run a PB, and you've got some questions for Linz. Congrats on that PB. That is a phenomenal performance. I know often when we do set that goal, we can be disappointed and we lose sight of the fact that we actually did have a good run, regardless of maybe we didn't hit the number we wanted to hit, but still smashed it out the park. So congratulations on that. I know you do have a few questions for Lindsey. One of them you mentioned was around nutrition. So I'm gonna give the floor to you and shoot away, and let's see how we can help you sort of readjust, realign, and go again.
Yeah. So when I'd done my time trials, I wouldn't have breakfast in the morning because it was just going to be 5Ks, and I'd eat afterwards, and it would be fairly early in the morning. And I'd practice my nutrition on my long runs, which was on a Sunday. So I'd eat a few hours beforehand, and then I'd take my a race fuel with me, which was a carbohydrate and electrolyte mix. And gels didn't agree with me, so I took chews, and that was all working very well. So in hindsight, maybe I should have treated my race this last Sunday as a time trial and not eaten beforehand. But I ate 3 hours before because I wanted to make sure that that was digested and not going to cause me problems. But I hadn't practiced that. And as we supposed to do is never anything new on race day. But somehow or another, the Sunday in my head was what I practiced nutrition. The race was on a Sunday, and I followed that routine. So my question is can that have caused something? Because I was super nauseous. I really, from about the 2nd kilometer onwards, I managed to do the first 5K split in under 20, but I just, with the nausea, and then there was heat along with it as well, I just couldn't maintain that pace, and I dropped back a little bit and lost the time in the second half. Is there something? My next plan is going to be a 21K, so the nutrition is going to be on a Sunday in a lower intensity. But I'm thinking that I hadn't practiced the nutrition at a higher intensity, and that maybe is what caused it. Is there something in that, and is there something I can do?
There is something in that, and I think so. Just from a physiological point of view, you really don't need any exogenous, so in other words, external source of energy for events of an hour at very high intensity, an hour and a half to an hour 45 at moderate intensity. So for something like a 10 kilometer, your normal routine that you followed for your 5K would work just as well. And the alternative is to practice it. Because your parkrun environment is now a comfortable environment, a comfortable, friendly environment for you. Yes, you want to run fast, but it's just a situation that lends itself to you being quite relaxed.
Yeah.
That is also very different. The 10K environment and the nerves associated with it mean that you could perhaps have some nutrition, but it would have to be small, because when we get very nervous, there is a disruption in the functioning of our GI tract. And so there would be some difference. Now, that is going to be what you're going to be faced with in the half marathon, okay? Because that kind of environment is not going to be natural. So some practicing, sure, but I would look at the amount. And so your meal 2 to 3 hours before will really be quite small. I mean, we're talking like maximum slice of toast type of thing. And then perhaps some contribution with like slow sipping of 500 to 600 mils over that 3 hour period of a energy drink or something like that, because that'll have a very low stress on your GI tract, and it's not a big amount. So 500 mils over a three hour period, or maybe call it 100 mils an hour, very small. and so your stomach should be able to manage that. And again, you can practice that in the lead up, but you won't be able to stimulate the nerves, but that's why we keep that amount low. And then the important thing for in the half marathon is that over that 12-week period is to maybe just do like 5K and then a 10K at that half marathon planned pace, and taking in some nutrition just to get used to absorbing that. And then the other thing to always look at is your 1919 points to literally 39:59. Okay, now with the full taper, etc., yeah, maybe 39:55 or whatever it is. But the point here is that it was always going to be tight, and so therefore conditions and absolutely perfect pacing were always going to play a significant role here. And we know that heat can blow time out by up to 4%. And so the combination of the nausea and the heat means that you probably weren't miles off. And if I just do some quick maths here, yeah, that's incredible. So 41:36 is 4% of 40. So that's pretty.
Yeah.
So in reality, despite the nausea that you were having, you were probably right on the bubble of the day. And so I reckon without the nausea, a sub 41 would have really been the equivalent of the best you could have hoped for on race day. Yeah, and I think between the nerves and the nutrition, which you're not used to, they probably combined, and the heat, although the heat's only started later, but the fact that it got hot later means that it was probably also a little warmer at the start than what is normal for the time of year. And so I'd say the heat probably also contributed a little bit to that feeling of nausea.
It's funny, Justin. I know you've got more questions, but it's funny, like listening to something like that, because like you obviously have beaten yourself up a little bit about not going sub 40. But when you get that perspective and you go, "Oh, hang on a sec, I actually smoked this thing. It was really good." So yeah, it's nice getting, in my opinion, getting like just another set of eyes on it that goes, you know what, that was actually pretty decent. So how do you feel hearing that?
Yeah, I thank you. That does make me feel very good. Yeah, and ultimately, I'd set out with 3 goals this year, and that's to do a new PB in the 10K, which is what I have achieved. And also, people this evening at Run Club were pointing out to me that my previous PB was done on a track. This course had 2 hairpin bends, and it was a little undulating. It was pretty level, but there were other runners. The tail enders of the 21K that had started earlier were in our way quite often too. So yeah, there were factors, you know. So really, I have smashed it. Really, I've got that. So I'm very pleased. Yeah. So thank you for that. Can I ask my next question, if I may?
Of course.
Just on the hill repeats, where I live, I'm really struggling to find, especially as my pace is picking up and I'm improving, I'm getting further up a hill before
fast people problems, Justin. Fast people problems.
And I can't get back down to the beginning, you know, in the time. So I run out of hill. I did ask the question from the coaches, and they did indicate that it's probably best, and I feel that it would be best to stick to the planned rests. But I know on one of the other previous podcasts, Lindsey was saying that the rest could be a bit longer. I was just wanting to, maybe I do the front few, and then it's only the last 3 or 4 that I need a bit more time on the rest to get further down, maybe. How important is that rest with the hills?
No, so on the hills, you know, it's such important work. But in some ways, I don't like them because it's literally the hardest session for me to predict performance, because 2 runners that run exactly the same time just because of a difference in shin length, for example, can run a hill very differently to another runner. So both predicting the paces that people should run those hills at, and then, of course, the recovery time and how long it should strictly be to get you full recovery. So, and that's the more important thing for me, is that when we do these hills, I don't want people stopping at the top, and I want people to be fully recovered by the time they get to the bottom. And so, because having a workout builder is such a nice feature to have on a watch, I have to pick a time. And so I'm going, okay, if somebody runs X amount of time up, then it'll take X amount of time down. So that is a little bit of a thumb suck. And so, no, if there's a workout, and can I tell you, in terms of one of the big mind shifts that people need to make when they, and we've chosen 50 as the line. That line can be, depending on the individual, 45 years old, or maybe it's 57 years old for someone else. If it's my friend Kirsten, it's probably going to be 75 years old. But that, where that kind of line comes in, and the principles of the FBF kick in, the recovery part becomes the more important part, because as we get older, the neuromuscular adaptation is as important as the physiological or energy transport, oxygen transport adaptation becomes. And so to keep that neuromuscular adaptation, which is something you understand well, because that is the adaptation that needed to happen for you to improve your cadence, you need to be fresh on every repeat. And so resting longer than is on the plan is more important for the neuromuscular. And as we get older, that's what we lose the fastest. And so even in our 3-step or 2-step intervals, if you are slowing down through the set because you're not getting enough recovery, make the recoveries longer. And so the exact same applies on your hill, is if it takes you a little bit longer to get down to the bottom, then take it. Yes, it messes up the workout builder, but I think in most watches, you can actually just click a little button that says change on button press. So you're still getting the recommendation from how long a thing's supposed to be, but it only flicks over. The next lap only starts when you hit the button, so that you can avoid the thing telling you to run and you're not yet at the bottom of the hill.
And then just leading on from that, I love doing park runs, and sometimes I have a progression run scheduled for the day, and so I try to fit these in. I do my best to time it in the area that I come to the start of the park run as while I'm still running and still doing it, whether it's a progression run or the others. I've just forgotten the names, the terminology, but are the
tempo intervals and
tempo intervals. But sometimes the park run start has gone over time a little bit, and I need to wait. Is that going to be? It's not going to mess things up too much.
I mean, if I had to assign a percentage to it, it would be 0.0000 something. So no, the answer is nothing noticeable there. And just because for other people also listening, is because this is a fairly common question, is that people like to run park run and they like to push park run. So the answer, the ideal answer, is to do it how you're doing it, which is to stick to the spirit of the workout while you're doing the park run, so you can just chalk another successful park run up. But there are other people that they actually want to run it as hard as they can. And my answer to that is quite simply that none of us are relying on this to earn a living, or there's nothing terminal about not being the absolute best runner we can be. So in that scenario, it is better to do park run easy 3 times a month and run it hard once a month, or to do it as part of the workout as you are doing it and then run it hard once a month. That's the ideal. But if you like to run parkrun hard every Saturday, just know that you can do it, and it will compromise your development a little bit, but absolutely it is something that you can do, and just know that the outcome is going to be different. But in terms of, yes, having to wait 2 or 3 minutes before carrying on, nah, that's making point whatever. It's not even worth getting worried about.
Good.
Excellent stuff. Any other questions from your side, Justin?
No, that's
You're all
it.
good. Fantastic. And what's your next parkrun milestone that you inching up on?
Well, 230 odd, I think.
Awesome. Jeez, that is good going.
I'm only 180 behind, Justin. I'm only 180 behind.
I'm not going to do the public mass, but I'm further behind. That is for sure. That is amazing, Justin. Thank you so much for your time today. We loved catching up, and I love chatting to members of our community wherever they are in the world, and just seeing the sort of results and the things that they are doing. You mentioned the half marathon that you're training for. When is race day?
That'll be the 29th of June. So I'll start with my 12-week training block next week.
Lovely. Week recovery after the 10K effort, as one should, and then back straight into it. And then I believe you're planning a marathon later in the year too?
Yeah. So I'll have 2 weeks after that. I've managed to find races that just work out very nicely with a plan, and that I can do a separate plan for each one. And so I'll be doing in November, I'll be doing the full marathon. That'll be my first official full marathon.
Oh, we can't wait to see how you go, and I love the way you I wish everybody listened as well as you did, Justin. That is the truth. It's like you do these 12-week blocks, you do the recovery, and you reap the rewards. So well done, mate. That is fantastic. Well done.
Thank you.